Hey everyone, welcome to today's session. Today we'll be learning about continuous integration and continuous delivery with AWS. Now, in this session, I'll be covering the key parts. First, what is continuous integration? Second, what is continuous delivery? Third, there is a difference between continuous delivery and the continuous deployment. And then I will discuss about what are the available tools we can utilize in achieving CI/CD in AWS. Okay, so let's get started. So what is continuous integration? Now, continuous integration in DevOps software development practice, where developers regularly merge their code changes into a central repository, after which automation build and test run. And continuous integration most often refers to the build or the integration stage of the software release process and entails that both an automation component CI or the CI or build service and a cultural component learning to integrate frequently. The key goal of the continuous integration are to find and address bug quicker, improve software quality, and reduce the time it takes to validate and release the software updates. So, what is continuous delivery? We talked about the continuous integration just a few seconds back, right? Now, what is continuous delivery? Continuous delivery is a software development practice where code changes automatically prepared for the release to production. A pillar of modern application development, continuous delivery expands upon continuous integration. So it's included. First step is the continuous integration and then the continuous deployment. And the continuous delivery expand upon the continuous integration by deploying all the code changes to a testing environment and not a production environment after the build stage. When properly implemented, developers will always have a deployment ready build artifact that has passed through a standalone test process. So what happens normally in the build phase, you compile the codes, install the dependencies, you have the code what is required to run, and then in deploy state, you just push the changes to the target servers, and they just restart the application or whatever is required to run the application properly. You do that part only. Now, continuous delivery lets developer automate the testing beyond just the unit test, so they can verify the application across the multiple dimension before deployment to customers. This test may include UI testing, load testing, integration testing, API reliability testing. This helps developers more thoroughly validate upon preemptively discovered issues. Like if you suppose a deployment fails, I mean it happens, right? In that time, I mean if you think about like you run something, then you try to deploy in some maybe staging server, production server. I mean there's a some time taking, right? Before even go to that stage, if some issues there, it should be you should just find it in the build phase, or maybe before while deploying something you didn't deploy and that deploy didn't happen. You should have a way to roll that back changes so the customer will not get affected immediately, right? Those kind of things is needed. Okay, with the cloud is easy to so this helps developers more thoroughly validate upon and preemptively discover the issues. With the cloud, it is easy and cost effective to automate the creation and the replication of multiple environments for testing, staging, and production, which was previously difficult to do on premises. Okay, now I want to talk about one more thing. There is two things. One is continuous delivery, just I talked about, and another is continuous deployment. Now, what is the difference between two? Okay, so here, what is with continuous delivery? Your code change is built, tested, and pushed through a non-production testing or staging environment, and that can be multiple parallel test stages before production deployment actually happens. Now, the difference between continuous delivery and the continuous deployment is that presence of a manual approval to update to production. With continuous deployment, there are actually no manual approval stage. You just, as soon as you made the changes, it go through the testing and it's go to the production directly, or maybe first go to staging and then go to the production directly. But there is no manual approval. But when you think about the continuous delivery, there you have the manual approval. So always keep remember that part. Now, what are the tools we have? for this continuous integration and deployment in AWS, first AWS code commit. Now, what is AWS code commit? AWS code commit is AWS managed Git service, just like GitHub, Bitbucket, and GitLab. It's useful if you keep the entire software development lifecycle inside the uh, AWS itself. Now, as I told, it's just your Git repository, and you have all the functionalities a normal Git have. Okay. Now next is the Git. Now next is code build part. Now what is code build tool? Code build is AWS CI/CD tool. Code build is AWS CI tool, or you can say build tool, where you can build your binaries or maybe the final output to run the application, or you can just make the things ready to run the application, and you can pass on as an artifact, or you can just move to some place to store it. It's up to you. Now coming to the code deploy. What is code deploy? Code deploy is AWS deployment automation tool, which helps deployment. Suppose you have a changes, you have maybe from the code build or maybe some repo, you want to make or you want to push the changes from S3 or code build anywhere to the staging or production application. You can do that via AWS code deploy. And in AWS code deploy, it is support for EC2, ECS, Lambda. So you can deploy to anywhere as you like. Okay. Now, and also, yes, code deploy also have support for the on-premise deployment also. Okay. Now, next thing is what AWS code pipeline. Now, code pipeline is deployment pipeline which bind together code commit, also other services like you can just select the source, the build, and the deployment phase. Also, the manual approval part also, like complete CI/CD orchestration you can do via the code pipeline. Okay. Code star, code step wraps all the things: code commit, code build, code deploy, and code pipeline into kind of binding. So you have the complete control via the code star. And cloud formation. Cloud formation is close cousin of these services, but it's more of the infrastructure as a code plus service kind of way. Okay. Now let's go to the demo part. I mean, we talked a lot about this theoretical part. Now let's jump to the demo. So how it works, I'll give you more details. You will see this screen. Okay. Now if we go to AWS code commit, we'll see each and every services or each and every tools that we have for the CI/CD. So first is AWS code commit. This one. Now you might see that I have few repo where I'm just doing some testing or demos or preparing. So you can see, if you click on that, you will see pull requests, commits, branches, git stacks, settings, all these kind of things, just like you might see in a normal Git repo. Now, next service, that is code build. See, this is the code build part where you give instructions on how the build process should work. So and you need a build spec file or any, you have to create a file in a YAML format that what the build should do. Like for example, this code build part. If we just click here, I have prepared it like for previous demo. I want to show you details what it can do. So code build, we'll see we are providing the build spec, the environment variables, the configuration, what need to be the logs, and we'll see the build history, how many times log built, and all this you can see it here. If you click on the build details, you will see all the build logs, the phases, what are the phases in the code build there is. I'll be coming to other in greater details. I just wanted to show you how it works. Okay. And now there is, let's go to the code deploy. You might see that you have deployment application. I have used for again previous demos. There I have mentioned where the deployment should happen. Like we can mention the deployment group and how the deployment should happen using an abstract.yml file. So for the code build, it's buildspec.yml. For the deployments, it's appspec.yml. Okay, let me go back to the source codes, and let me show you the demo how the file looks. So for the build phase, the file required usually the build spec.yml. So let's look at that file. You can see in this the spec.yml file, I am giving it's have a set of instructions where we are saying that okay, phases install phase, then pre-build phase, then the build phase, and the post-build phase. Post-build phase. So what are things that do? I mean, in the install phase, we mention what are the runtime needed, what are the commands maybe to prepare the environment, and in the pre-build phase, we might want to change some permission of the file, install the binaries and libraries, and whatever need to be done, we can do here. And in the build phase, where we will run the actual commands, like what is the actual command you need to run the make a build, that one. Or maybe you want to run the test cases, you should run the test cases in the command in build commands itself. And then post build, if you have any kind of you want to notify to the user, or maybe you want to deploy the changes to somewhere, or you want to pass on as artifact, you can just mention the artifact here. Now look at the appspec.yml file, what it does. So if you look at the appspec.yml file, it will require for the code deploy phase. Here I'm saying that we have hooks. Like what are the hooks available? Let me just show you. AWS hooks, dev code deploy hooks. So we go here, we'll find out what are the available hooks to you, and go down, see before install, after allow. So there is a complete list, and the flow is there. Like what will be the first will be the before install, then install. This, if you see the black ones, these are the reserve hooks which you cannot use, but you can use the rest of the one. So allow after install, allow test like traffic, allow, and all that. So there is, if you go very down in this page, you will see what are the lifecycle event hook available based on what kind of infrastructure you're running. We'll see that application stop, download bundle, before we install, after install, application start, validate service, before block traffic, after block traffic, and all the hooks are there. And if you see here, I have utilized the application stop. I'm just stopping the server. Before install, I'm just running the command that is required, the before installation step. After install, I'm just doing some installation, maybe just some checks and all. And application start, I'm running the application. I'm again starting it, because in the application stop, I stop the application. In validation service, I'm just checking the service we run, it's working fine or not. Okay, that's what it does. Now I have shown you the two files required. I've shown you the flow. Now let's make a complete CI/CD flow using AWS code pipeline. So you might see how to set, what it looks like. So in AWS code pipeline, you have a source stage where you have either S3 code commit. I will show other option also, GitHub option available. Then there is deploy stage where you can deploy to either EC2 instance or ECS instances, anywhere you want. And in the code build, the build will happen. Okay. Now let me show you the entire thing. So if you want to know more about, you can just simply go to AWS code pipeline and see the rest. Again, you will see the entire flow. The first is source, then the build, then test, then staging, and then production. Okay, now let us look at one working demo. So you might see I'm going to the pipelines, and there I have one project there. So let's see a CI/CD demo. Here I have one ECS cluster services set up already. You might see as soon as I make changes and push the changes here, then the entire the CI/CD AWS code pipeline listen to the event that as soon as the code change happen, it will start the source stage, then it will start the build stage, and then it will move the changes to production. Okay, and let me show you the exact build spec using in this, and what are the code I'm going to run, all that. Okay, let's do that. Okay, so you are seeing here, see that's simple. It's a Node.js application. where we have this simple CI/CD version 1. If you just go to the root of the directory, and you will see CI/CD version 1, and then it's a status, and then just to check that the service is working fine. Okay, now you might see that as soon as I move the changes and just push the to master branch, where I had listener in the AWS pipeline, the entire change will get deployed. So let's just look at the build spec. So here's the build spec. Build spec, build automation part, where I'm logging into ECR, and then in ECR, I'm assigning the repository URL here. Just a moment. Yeah. Okay. You might see in the build spec.yml file. In this build spec in the build spec file, we are what we're doing here. We are logging into ECR. We are assigning that entire URI, that repository UI in a variable. Then we are starting the build, and then we are doing what are the required commands to push the image into the ECR, and then we are making a image definition file which will be needed for the deployment part. Okay. Now if you come to Docker file, it's a simple Docker file. We're doing not much. From Node.js version 14 image, we are just creating the work directory, then copying the packagation, then installing all the dependencies, then copying it and exposing the 3000 port. Okay, here. Okay, now let's make one change. It will be VIC2. So right now I will show you that right now it's the only version 1 is running, and as soon as this code get updated, it will become version 2. So let's do that. Git commit, then let's call it version 2 changes, and do that. Origin master. As soon as I push that, you will see the code pipeline will start the process. Let me show you. You can see this pipeline just started just now, version 2 changes, and let's go to the EC2. There, if you go to that load balancers, demo load balancer, and if you try to load the API using the load balancer URL, you'll see it's version 1. As soon as the build stage done and the deployment is done, you will see it's version 2, as we have mentioned in the codes. Okay, and you understand the first thing is happening is the stages. So source stage is done, we just pass on to the next stage, the build stage, and from the build stage is pass the changes to the deployment stage. That would what it happens. While this happening, let's wait for it to done. Okay, so the deployment is done now. Okay, so I have shown you that how this easily stage by stage happen. Now let us create a new pipeline and see how all these things works all together. So let's click on the create pipeline, and we'll see in the pipeline phase it asks for the name. Let's say demo pipeline, and then it asks for a role. Is a new role or existing role? You can go ahead with the new role, and we'll create all the necessary. You can see that advanced settings, artifact store. Do you want to store the artifacts in a new repo every time when you create it, or you might have existing repo which I already have one and utilize those for all this. So it's good to have sometime, because we have soft limit in number of buckets creation, and that might go overboard. So let's do it with the existing bucket. That saves a lot of bucket naming, right? And for the encryption, you can go ahead with the default AWS managed key, or you can select the customer managed key. It's up to you. And then you have to think about now the source part. As I talked, the source, then the build, and then the deployment. So in the source stage, you have to mention either code deploy, ECR, Amazon S3, Bitbucket, GitHub, GitHub version 2, and GitHub Enterprise Server. Let's go with the AWS code commit because we have a repo in code commit. Then we'll ask for the repo name. Let's go with the code deploy demo, branch name master, and here we'll see change direction. Now, change direction part, there's two way. One is the Amazon CloudWatch event. Based on whenever you push the code, there will be automatic trigger, and one other is AWS code pipeline. Now, AWS code pipeline part, it will happen based on the AWS code pipeline part. It will periodically look for the changes and will do that part. Now, at auto format, do you want to code pipeline default or full clone? Go with the default part. The next. Now, the next phase is the build provider part. In the build provider, you have either Jenkins and the code build. We have code build, so let's go with the code build. And I have another already existing project. But what if we go for the new project? So click on the new project. Make sure you have the buildspec.yml file, and then you'll see it will ask for the project name. So let's say demo code build. Then all these details. Then then the additional configuration if you want any. Then you can go with the manage image or custom image. So if your use case covered, can be done by the manage AWS images, it will be better. If not, you can go for the manage custom image. You have to just upload the image in the ECR repo. Let's go with the managed one. Amazon Linux 2, runtime standard, and image is the latest image. Always is the latest image that I ask. If you are going to build a Docker file, you have to enable this part, privilege mode. Otherwise, your build gonna fail. So make sure to enable that. Service role, you can say new service role. Timeout for this part. Make sure you. Now it's up to your requirement. Let's give the basic one and all that. Okay. Now see here the build spec part. Here you can. I forgot. I think. So you can see in this part you can add your environment variables if you want to supply during the build phase. And you come here, it will the build spec part. You can either suppose it's a build spec.yml, then you don't have to provide any name. If it's different name, then you should mention the build spec entire file name here. Then the logs, if you want to enable logs, and you can create like this way. Okay. And in this build section, you can run the build cases if you want to make binary output or any kind of output you want to make. And next stage, you can also see the environment variables. If you enter the environment variables here, it will override the environment variables that you mentioned in the code build phase. Okay. Single build. Let's click on the next deployment provider. Now in the deployment provider, you can see there's a lot of options. AWS App Config, Cloud Formation, StackSet, Code Deploy, Elastic Beanstalk, OpsWork, AWS Service Catalog, Alexa Skill Set, ECS Blue Green, Amazon S3. It's up to you where you want to do the final deployment. Usually it's code deploy, and you'll see there region, application name. I have one application name that is Node App Server Deployment, and I can just mention the deployment group and it's done. If you want ECS, just select the ECS and then the cluster name. Let's say sample CI/CD sample cluster, and then CI/CD cluster, and then demo node app service. And the file name, if the file name is that image definition, then you don't have to mention it. But if it's a different file, then you must mention the exact file name here. Okay. And deployment timeout, if you like say for few after around 1 hour, 2 hour, or 3 hour, deployment still not happens, in that case you just say fail the deployment. You can mention it here in minutes. Now if you do the next pass, okay, and create the code deploy, it will create the code deployment for you. Okay, so that's easy how it is to create a code deployment and then do this part. It's up to you how you want to utilize this and go ahead with that. So that's how we create the code pipeline. And we see that this is going on, that source phase, then the build phase, and then the deployment phase will happen. Okay. Now what you should do next, learn about all these individual services, then try to make everything by yourself and try it out. Okay. Thank you for listening to the session. Hope to see you in the next session.